Next up, we have a speaker from Google who is here to talk to us about the importance of having a strong company culture, the importance of having an innovation-driven work culture. His name is Cliff Redeker. He is the Innovation and Culture Evangelist at Google, and I welcome him up on stage. Come on, Cliff. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm really thrilled to be here. One of the coolest things that I've done at Google is make ice cream in the Google cafes. It's one of the things that we want people to do, have a sense of everyday innovation, try new and exciting things. And so I was extremely pleased when I was having dinner last night. I found macaroon-flavored ice cream at the Chocolat restaurant down the street here in Bucharest. So it completely blew my world. So thank you for expanding my ice cream horizons. What I wanted to do today was really provide you with a framework for how Google approaches innovation and how we make sure that everyone is working on cool projects that matter. And it's really our aspiration that these principles are universal. Our goal is to make work better in places throughout the world. So to start, I wanted you all to think of a time when you really felt empowered at your job. What did that feel like? When did you think that you were really on top of things, pursuing some crazy idea? Was it when you were off by yourself, thinking of some inspiration at your desk? Was it at the coffee shop? Was it when you were presenting in front of a meeting or in front of 200 people? What factors were there in common, and how can you make that be relevant every day? You can also think of many things when you work. Everyone thinks of the great bosses that they've had and some that have been less than great. And it's really true that people at work are more likely to leave managers than they are to leave roles and teams. So how can we make sure that every culture at Google and abroad can be innovative, and how can we preserve that culture in other organizations? So to give you a framework, I wanted to fast forward to a quote from Larry Page here. We're really all about the moonshot thinking. It's the Google's the company of the self-driving cars and the 2 billion YouTube viewers and the hundreds of hours uploaded to YouTube every day. But what really keeps us going as a company is this idea of everyday innovation. We realize that if we don't keep innovating, some other company will serve our users in a better way, and we'll be a little bit left behind. Now, the true innovation comes from things that are revolutionary and not just evolutionary. It's not just an importance of making sure that the website loads a few milliseconds faster or that the results are a little bit more accurate. We want to do something that can truly change the world. Now, we had some elementary starts here. This will be the focus of our talk today. I wanted to talk really first about how companies provide decisions, the manager's mindset, some of the design principles and rituals you can take with you back to your organizations. This is the first Google office. It's a bit of a page through our company's history. Think of what your companies looked like when they first got started. Ours had a lot of lawn. It had the original Google parking spot. It had the original Google garage door. It had the original Google founders and the conference table and the data center. Our machines are a little bit more modern today. Our founders have a little bit more gray hair than what they first did, but the principles are the same. And I think really the most important factor that influences Google's innovation is how we approach our decisions and how we ensure that we're making decisions with velocity. Back in that day, there were just a handful of people at Google doing cool things. When I joined, there were about 20,000 employees, and now there's over 104,000 people globally, and there's 20,000 people just in Mountain View. So how do we make sure that everyone has this bias for action? How do we make sure that everyone is able to implement their ideas and not get bogged down into a bureaucracy as the company continues to grow? Now, to that end, we have a few answers, a few experiments that we've run to solve the problem of decision making. The first thing is a realization that all decisions are made under uncertainty. You're never going to have perfect information. The best you can do is look at the information you have, make a decision, and then see what the outcome is. And certainly, we've all made decisions that have, good decision, good outcome is great. That's what everyone wants. I myself have made some good decisions that have had bad outcomes. That's not a very pretty story. And of course, there are, in some cases, you can make, bad decisions that have good outcomes, but those are usually saved for a Friday night or the weekend stories. At Google, we have, what's called Larry's rules for decision making. So when he took over as CEO, one of the things that he did was send out an email, a manifesto. In this email, he wrote that at Google, we want to make sure that everyone's meetings are efficient. We tend to have more meetings than the average person at the average company. We certainly send more email than the average company, and I can attest to that. But every meeting at Google needs to have a handful of things. First of all, it needs to have an agenda. If there's no agenda, that's a problem. What are you there to decide about? It needs to have all the right people in the room that can contribute to the discussion. No meetings just for the sake of meeting. There needs to be a time to discuss, a time to debate, but also a time to decide, and that's probably the most important part. We all need to rally around a decision to evaluate how it works and then iterate on that. And he specifically gave us permission that if we're in a meeting where none of those factors are present or if some are missing, we're free to get up and leave and go do something more productive with our time. So in that sense, we have this spirit of velocity that propels us forward as a company. And I think the broader principle is also true. We're all making decisions under uncertainty, and it's really important for us to make a decision, stick with it, and see how it turns out. And so there's also the importance of meaning in a person's job. When I told you to think back to the time when you really felt empowered at your job, when you were really excited to be there, you really found a sense of meaning, and you connected to the broader mission of the company, or maybe connecting to a user that you're serving. Laszlo Bach, the former head of our people operations division, has said that if you connect people to their work, they're 21% more productive. Now, this is true not only at Google, but in companies worldwide. The literature in the organizational psychology world mirrors the same thing. If you can connect people to the greater good, you can improve their happiness and improve their productivity. There is even a study across different fields as well. A university researcher looked into the happiness and the productivity of even people who were on the janitorial staff at a certain college. And the people who were on the janitorial staff that were able to connect their work to a higher sense of mission were happier and were also more productive. Now, for us at Google, the sense of values that we have center around the ideas of mission, transparency, and voice. And so I encourage you all to think of ways that your mission can be applicable to your employees. For us, our mission is really all about technology. We really believe that technology is something that can improve people's lives. There's a whole bit about organizing the world's information and making it universally accessible and useful. Yet we also realize the mission is something that changes over time. When we first got started, there were 10 blue links providing people with the answers that they were searching for. That's since moved on to other product areas, to Android, to Chrome, to self-driving cars. Even if you're in Sydney, Australia right now, there's a way to get your burritos delivered to your house by Project Wing drones. So our mission has expanded over time, but it's really incumbent on every Googler to have a sense of ownership in that mission and to not be afraid to call out our leaders when they feel that we've strayed from that mission. On the transparency side, we have a dramatic access to information internally. It really helps us inform the decisions we have by being able to look across the organization, across the 100,000 people to see what other folks are working on. Now, this really comes into play every Thursday. We call it the Thursday Google Information Forum, TGIF. Our leaders will get up on stage and they'll spend about 30 minutes going through the product updates for a specific area. What's Google.org doing? What happened at our developer conference? What's up with this new Pixel phone that just got released? The experts will come up on stage and talk about their successes and what they've done, which is certainly great. It's a great celebration, and there's beer involved, so that makes it an even greater time. But we also want to acknowledge ways that we've fallen short, celebrate failure as much as we celebrate success. Now, for every large meeting at Google, there's 30 minutes or more dedicated to open Q&A, so people can take to the microphone and then argue with the founders or bring up some points, and whether it's a small question of the availability of Diet Coke in the kitchen or some hard-hitting question about Google policy, people will write in their answers with the expectation that they get a thoughtful response. And it's not uncommon for change to happen on this very stage. Now, I'm not necessarily suggesting for every one of your companies you get up on stage on a Thursday and have a meeting week in and week out. But what can you as leaders do to let all of your employees know what you're thinking about, what your top-of-mind ideas are? And even for all companies, ways that you've failed or ways that you've learned from your mistakes. It's also important to measure what matters in a very transparent sense. At Google, we follow this policy called the Objective and Key Results philosophy. All goals at Google are public within the company, from the very highest levels at the product level down to us as individuals. These goals are what we call audacious yet achievable. There are some things that we need to accomplish every quarter. We need to make sure that our products work and that our users' needs are served. But there's also room to do something that's truly transformational, do something that's truly innovative. We grade these results on a scale between 1 and 0, where 1 is the perfect score and 0 is a truly failing score. And you may ask yourself, what would a really great quarter be for Google? I see them in the news all the time. Surely we must be accomplishing every single goal that we come up with. And the answer may surprise you. At Google, a really great quarter, an outstanding one, is when we accomplish about 70% of our goals, scoring a 0.7, 0.8 on our rankings. If we ever got the full 100%, it would mean that the goals were not audacious enough, and it would in fact be a failing quarter for Google. So in a similar way, this creates a safety net for failure. And now it's not to say that you have sacrificial goals, some idea of a space elevator you're going to put there every single quarter, knowing that if everything else succeeds and the space elevator doesn't get off the ground, you're going to be promoted and so forth. But the principle is still the same. We want people to pursue this crazy idea. If it actually happens, it'll truly transform the lives of our users and the company as a whole. But if it doesn't, people can get to work. They can learn from those mistakes and shortcomings, and failure, in fact, becomes a badge of honor at Google. Now, we also have a strong sense of voice. There's things like an employee happiness survey called Googlegeist. We send that out. We make the results public within the company once again. And even here, if you're on a team that's maybe not the happiest, or if you're on a team that's maybe not the most innovative, it's really not the end of the world, because the expectation from our senior leadership is that you make it better, you take ownership to solve the problem, that you be an owner and not an observer. And the example you see here is from another cool technique that we've pioneered called the bureaucracy busters. Now, the idea here is that people on the ground, people doing the work, know ways to save the company money, so have them write in their answers. You write in your ideas, the top ideas are voted upon, and then implemented inside of a 60-day time frame. And so we have this saying at Google that if you're the person complaining about something, you're very quickly put on the team that's in charge of fixing it. So again, having this bias for action is very important. Now, all this touchy-feely talk about goals and transparency is really useful, but what it actually does is create a sense of trust and vulnerability across the organization. If our senior leaders are getting up on stage and saying, hey, we had this big problem with brand safety, or we ran this new redesign of our website, and things just didn't really work for our users, and Cliff, why aren't you wearing Google Glass right now, or updating my status on Google Plus? If the leaders come up on stage and admit to their shortcomings, it makes them vulnerable, it makes them accessible, and it encourages the spirit across the organization. And the research here goes back again to the organizational psychology world, where teams that create a sense of trust are in fact more productive. If you trust your employees to do the right thing, to answer and solve their own problems, then they will surprise you and get it done. Now, this also takes a manager's mindset. For us all here as leaders in innovation, there's ways that we can motivate our teams to think innovatively and also to be productive. Now, here's where Google's data-driven mindset has come into a full overdrive. We're data-driven in everything we do, from the products we launch to the services that we offer. And so we wanted to take that same approach and apply it towards management at Google. Our founders were always a little distrustful of middle management. There was a famous period early on in our history where Larry Page himself decided, these are smart Google engineers. We've sourced them. They're able to work on these cool projects. Why do we even need managers? And he got rid of all the middle managers at Google, which may sound scary, especially for those of us here that manage teams. You're instantly out of a job because Larry Page thinks that engineers can self-manage. As you can probably predict, this turned into being a big disaster for Google. People were going to Larry Page with their vacation requests and their random personnel issues, and the whole system was on the verge of collapse. So we brought back the managers. Life is better here at Google, but we still have this skepticism. How can we make sure that managers are really motivating their teams? You can always think of how working for a bad boss is disheartening and how it really weighs down your productivity. We saw the results. People change their jobs about every 2 to 3 years at Google, and so we can track the performance of individuals as they work from high-performing managers to ones that are less so. And you can probably figure out what the results are. The highest performing managers led the highest performing teams. But we wanted to have this spirit of constant improvement. And so we looked at the managers that were falling short, tried to find some commonalities, and what we came up with were these different ideas. There's, in fact, 10 of them in a case study, but they really all boil down to these 3. The best mentors are those that have a coaching mindset, that really trust their team to solve things, that they don't micromanage. They push down barriers and get out of the way instead of letting them get bogged down in bureaucracy. And they articulate a clear vision for where the project and where the team should go. Now, for those managers that were falling short in this area, we created a training program called Project Oxygen. And going through the process, the failing managers received about a 15% increase in their upward feedback scores year over year. So once again, this is identifying a problem, creating a Googler-driven solution, iterating on it, and then launching it to the rest of the world. Now, I think this is also relevant for the companies that you lead as well. What are your ideas for great management? Like, who are the great bosses that you look up to at your company? What's part of their secret sauce? Identify those techniques and find ways to reinforce them across your entire organization. Now, it's not entirely fair to lay the entire success and failure of a team specifically on a manager, though that's something that everyone wants to do. We wanted to look at team dynamics as well and see what would happen if every team at Google was successful. We were looking for the perfect algorithm. We looked at over 200 different variables. We wanted to see if the most productive teams were the ones that were all seated together, or the ones that had all high performers, or the ones that had all MBAs, what the optimal number was, or the right amount of people with stunning blonde hair. I don't know. We wanted to see what made for the true impact on a team's productivity, and it boiled down to these 5. You'll see that none of them are really super revolutionary. We want to all see the impact we have of the work that we do. Who in this room would say, like, I want to work on a team that's not dependable? Probably not. But the factor that most influenced team productivity was in the bottom right there, the idea of psychological safety. Now, we define psychological safety as a sense of comfort on your team, where if you're the most quiet person in the room, your feedback is still taken into consideration, your voice still matters, where you're not ostracized for failure. This, again, harkens back to research done at Harvard Business School, but it delivers real results for Google. We polled our organization through our things like our employee happiness survey. We didn't just ask are you psychologically secure? Yes, no, but we went into more detail. Do you have the ability to innovate in your job? Do you feel you can bring your whole self to work? And the teams that were more psychologically secure had about a 40% increase in the achievement of their sales targets. So not only is designing a culture that builds the happiest, healthiest, and most productive employees great for morale and great for winning Great Place to Work awards, it also delivers financial results to the business. Now, there are some design principles for creativity that we follow that we also believe are universal. And this, again, harkens back to our values. We have these 5. The idea of a shared vision, so that's people getting up on stage just like I am right now, talking about our successes, failures, and goals. We want people to have a sense of curiosity. If you are doing the same thing 2 years from now as you are today, something's wrong. You need to be innovating your existing job. There needs to be a sense of risk-taking and collaboration. We prioritize the success of teams over that of individuals at Google. We also believe that innovation is a universal right in our organization. There's a collective responsibility for innovation, whether it's in your own product area or not. There's no chief innovation officer or innovation department at Google. It's a collective responsibility. And I think the best example is one that we just recently launched. This is Dimitri. He is an engineer at Google who was born and lost his hearing at about the age of 1 year old. And so he progressed through his life never being able to hear his grandchildren, participate in meetings. When he came to Google, we're in a bit of a privileged position. We have stenographers that transcribe every single meeting that we have, so that way people who are deaf or hard of hearing can hear what's going on. But great ideas don't always happen in the boardroom. They also happen in the line for coffee or in the micro kitchen. And for Dimitri, this posed a problem. He would have to open up his phone, connect to a remote transcriptionist that may or may not be available, and then the whole flow of the conversation was lost. Now, Chet was another engineer on Dimitri's team who experienced and saw the frustrations that Dimitri was going through. And so over the course of the weekend, he thought to himself, hey, we have this Vision API, we have this Translate API, we have all this Voice API in our cloud services. What would happen if I put together an app that automatically took dictation for Dimitri? So over the course of the weekend, he put it through, brought it to work the next Monday, and the team rallied around it. They thought it was something truly great. We improved it a little bit since and launched it at Google I/O this past early May. And now anyone throughout the world can have a live transcription feature where it will take a dictation of everything that's being said in a meeting. And not only that, it works across the Google language portfolio, about 95% of the spoken languages throughout the world. So if I'm speaking in English, then I switch over to French, it realizes that. If I'm speaking to a Romanian audience, the Romanian will come through perfectly. Now, the tool is useful, and it's a great feature to launch, and certainly it's improving the lives of people throughout the world. But the main principle behind it was not Chet's responsibility. No one specifically told him, hey, you need to design this feature. It wasn't even in his job description. But the principle we have at Google is that there's a collective responsibility for innovation, and so we want everyone to be like Chet and to help teams out. In fact, for me personally, through some of our internal tools, I get an email every Monday morning about teams that could either benefit from the skills that I have or teams that would help me develop skills that I want to move on to the next level. We have this philosophy as well of launching and iterating. Now, we open source a lot of the projects that we work on. Chrome is a great example. If you think back to the early days of Chrome, it was not a very beautiful browser. It was competing against some really entrenched players in the marketplace. But our engineers decided that they would make this constantly better. We wouldn't have to wait for version 2.0 6 months down the road. We were going to release a new version of Chrome every 6 weeks. Now, fast forward to today, and we're on Chrome version 70, which is great. It's this idea of constant improvement, following where the users are leading us. But also, you as a consumer can download Chrome version 71, the next wave. The bugs that you submit to that new design are put into the same place that our engineers work from in order to solve the bugs that they discover. So there's this partnership between our users and our designers, and it's really true. When you're designing for something that's innovative, you need to constantly think of ways to improve it and take into account the user feedback. And so as we continue on today, there's an idea here of thinking 10x. This is a mantra that's been bandied about at Google for some time, but the principle is really straightforward. In order to do something that's truly innovative, going back to the quote that Larry said earlier, we can't just do the routine anymore. We need to do something that's radically different. What are some huge societal problems that we can answer using breakthrough technology as applicable? What are our technical strengths and insights that we can bring to bear on a new field? Now, 10x thinking is something that permeates life at Google. Of course, there is room for everyday innovation as well, but the best recent example of that is from our Makani team. Now, on the Makani team, it was designed by a bunch of kite surfing enthusiasts, and people that go kite surfing often come up with crazy ideas when they're out there on the water. And so these engineers wondered, what is the state of the wind power industry in the world? How do you generate more wind energy? It could be a way for the future for us as we move towards renewable resources. In order to generate more wind power, the easiest way to do it is to build larger turbines. And these turbines generate more electricity and sounds good initially. However, you'll reach a ceiling. There will be a height at which you can build and can build no more. They're harder to manufacture, to transport, and to install. And then people are thinking that it obstructs the views of their golf course or kills birds and things like that. And so going back to the idea of the kiteboard, the engineers wondered, what if we launched the wind turbines in the air and made them fly around in circles? And so what they did is they worked out some prototypes, and for the graph here you can see by having an autonomous plane flying at about 300 meters in the air, we're able to generate wind power that is then tethered to the ground. The base station, the installation requirements are much less because you're just based on the plane and the tether, and it unlocks some new capabilities. This shows where wind power is currently viable throughout the world, but if you fly higher on a Makani system, it becomes more viable in other areas throughout the world. And it's this true 10x idea. The first kites that they worked in had a power output of about 2 kilowatts. We took that times 10 for our first prototype, and then our commercial model right now comes in at the 600 kilowatt level. So it's about a 30x idea. This wouldn't have happened if we kept going down the same line of innovation of building bigger and bigger generators. You needed to go back to the original statement of the problem, try something radically different that's based on your technical strengths. And as a result, we've become really adept in predicting the wind speed, and it turns out the higher you fly, the more consistent wind that you're able to generate. So there's also this concept of ritual that I think ties it all together. I got my degree in history back in the day, and I think that there's really a humanities perspective to innovation that's important. if you think of what culture is really just a group of individuals united around some certain values, and they create ritual to reinforce these values. Now, the idea, and I think the takeaway for you and your organizations, is to identify the rituals that are most important to you based on the values that are most important to your organization. How can you promote ritual to exemplify these characteristics? Probably the best example at Google is what we do on our Day of the Dead celebration. Now, we do have a lot of quirky engineers at Google, many of whom go to the Burning Man festival up in the desert in Nevada. And the whole idea of Burning Man is that of radical self-inclusion. People are creating these massive works of art, and many of them, as the name suggests, are incinerated and burned down at the end of the festival. So we wanted to find a way to bring that spirit back into Google, and so teams will have a Day of the Dead where people will write down their ideas, their failed projects, their failed lines of code, some personal things that they're going through, and then those will all be ritually safely and with the supervision of the Mountain View Fire Department lit on fire, symbolizing the birth of new ideas from the ashes of the old. Now, not every ritual at Google and not every ritual you design needs to be that much of a fire hazard, but think of dramatic steps that you can take to reinforce the values you have as an organization. For us, it's the idea of constantly innovating. We also have the 20% initiative, where people are encouraged to work for other teams for a portion of their job. As it becomes more successful, they spend more resources behind it, and you follow the current. Employees will find new ideas to work on, and you as managers can support that and develop it through something like the 20% program. We also have a concept of failing well at Google. As I've said before, we have had some great successes at Google, but we've also had some notable failures. We just recently sent Googleplex out to that great farm up north where there's a lot of puppies and lots of relaxation. Googleplex is no longer around. What are things that we've learned from the experience with Googleplex and others, and how does that improve our brainstorming process? We follow a design principle called pre-totyping at Google. Now, pre-totyping is one step before the prototype. So when you're in the prototyping stage, you're just really thinking about really great ideas. What can you really do to succeed? What are ways you can rapidly evaluate these ideas so that you only focus on the long successes? There's a specific team inside of our research division that's dedicated towards rapid evaluation and poking holes in individual ideas until what's left are the good ones that we can spend more time working on. Now, the gentleman here is Astro Teller. He's the head of our research division over at X, and he's said that if you can't afford the cost of failure, you can't afford the cost of brilliance. Now, we've certainly had our rogues gallery of failed projects. You can see there's Orchid, Picasa, Google News, Google Reader. Some of those things are up there, and I feel truly bad about them. But we take the most successful parts of even our failing ideas and move them into new products. So if you were to think about Google+, what are the features that most people use? There'd be the Hangouts feature, which is now an important part of our enterprise cloud offerings in the G Suite. And there's also the Photos feature. Google Photos is a product with hundreds of millions of users worldwide, and it's what will really tell me to find all the pictures of me, holding ice cream in Bucharest, even though I didn't have to tag each picture in such a way. So we take the elements of failing ideas and make them into successful ones. And we also have a post-mortem culture at Google, whereby even if you truly fail, if you're the person that marked the entire internet as spam, and one day you're trying to go to a safe website and it says this is spammy, are you sure you want to go to the CNN.com or whatever, and you go to a spammy website and it would say the opposite. Instead of firing that engineer, he created a post-mortem document saying what happened, how it was fixed, what teams were involved, how it's prevented going forward. And this blameless document is put then in a repository so that people can learn from those mistakes. So I wanted to tie this all together in saying that all companies need to have what we call a mission that matters. I should also say, if you have questions, write them down on the sheet of paper, and we'll get to them in just a moment. But it's important that all employees tie into parts of the company mission and make it their own. And I think the story of Google's art and culture mission is one that's particularly relevant, and it ties in a lot of our innovative principles. So it started out as a small 20% project. Amit Sood grew up in India, wasn't really able to travel much as a kid, wanted to tap into Google's scale to help the culture industry. Now he started out with a few partners, a few dozen images. There's now 1,200 partners and 6 million works of art in our collection. And it's free for the whole world to use via the Google Art and Culture app. It's built on our technical insights, things like the art camera here, taking gigapixel resolution images of the world's great works of art. It's a partnership with multiple organizations, mostly nonprofits throughout the world. It even draws in things like our Street View camera into a miniaturized space so that you can go inside of public buildings. Now, what you see here is the Opéra Garnier in Paris. As I said, also a French major. French and history was really my deal back then. And I went to the opera in Paris, and it's lovely. You sit in your chair. On the ceiling, there's a mural painted by Marc Chagall. It looks all rather lovely, but it's not particularly accessible. The only way to see this is if you fly to Paris, as people should, and buy tickets to the ballet, as people should. But when we went to digitize that space, the first thing we did was use our image processing to get rid of that chandelier, so that way people can see the entire image. It's maybe 30 meters across, so it's a pretty substantial work of art. At this time, we were also approached by Marc Chagall's son, who had said that he'd always thought he was featured in this mural, but could never quite figure out where or when. And we worked with him to zoom in on a specific portion of the mural, something that you wouldn't normally be able to see unless you brought binoculars to your ballet. And what we have here is a man, woman, and a child, Marc Chagall, his wife, and their infant son. And the only way we were able to tell that was by the single splotch of yellow paint on Chagall's face. So this is a story that was told through technology to the benefit of culture for the rest of the world. Now, we've also had some other technical implications as well. We have this art selfie. About 70 million people took their art selfie the first week we released this feature, and hopefully some of you did as well. If you think about what it represents, it's a great thing to share. It's a cool thing to put on the Instagram, but it also makes art more accessible. No matter what I try with my exercise regimen, I still haven't quite gotten the Michelangelo's David, set up, to fully work. But I do now know that there's some random photo of a Dutch sailor with, stunning blonde hair in some random museum in the Netherlands that I would never have known existed before, and now I'm there to seek it out. There's also a bit of preservation as well, so this is another 10x idea. The sad truth of art in the world is many permanent pieces are succumbing to the ravages of time and conflict. And that cultural patrimony could be lost forever. Think of the fire at Notre Dame Cathedral a few weeks ago, the destruction of the Brazilian National Museum by fire last year. We were able to salvage some of the collection at the Brazilian Museum based on our scans, and that turned out to be one of the few elements saved from that destruction. In a similar way, we worked with a nonprofit to create very precise measurements of the Notre Dame Cathedral, and this university research will hopefully inform its reconstruction. And what you see here are Buddhist stupas in Bagan in Myanmar. Now, these stupas are in danger of collapse due to recent earthquakes in the area, but now you can go on a virtual tour and see digitally what you couldn't see physically. There's an education component as well, so that kids throughout the world can tap into the world's art heritage, go snorkeling in the Great Barrier Reef or climb the Burj Khalifa. And it really goes to show that Google's mission can be even made applicable in the culture space. Culture is something that really matters, and digital can help it. So as we wrap up, I did want to see if there were first time for questions. Any deep, dark secrets on your mind. Of course, if you want to get in touch with me, I'm on the LinkedIn and the Instagram down there, and that's my horse photography from my most recent trip down to Provence. But are there any questions or deep, dark secrets on your mind about Google, things that you've wanted to know? We got some up here. Awesome.
Okay. So I'd like to remind everyone that you have to download the My Connector app, okay, in order to ask questions. And yes, we do have a question. But
Awesome.
first of all, I want to thank you because your presentation made me feel very good about myself. I'm very successful at failing. So now I feel like a better person.
Thank you.
Okay. So we have the first question. How would you identify if an idea/process needs to be improved or scraped, followed by introduction of something new?
Okay, that's a great question, and for the person in the room who asked it, thank you very much. We do have some literature for you to check out as well at the end. So it is this question: how many resources do you put behind an idea before you determine whether it's successful or not? The way we approach it at Google is this idea of a risk portfolio. So decision makers and teams are given a specific budget with the expectation that they maximize their return. And so individual managers can choose to place ideas behind certain bets. We also will start very small with all of our ideas and projects. If it's something that doesn't require a lot of resources to do a quick prototype, like Chet's live transcribe feature, we'll do it, and as we see it's success, we'll put more things behind it. Now the question is how do you do something the same or try something radically different? I would say once you feel you've reached a rut and like a frontier is when you kind of go back to the sense of the original problem. So if you're frustrated, if you even just want to encourage your team to take a Friday afternoon just to brainstorm on a new idea, I think that's how you'll find the new direction.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Before we take the next question, I just want to say that Cliff was kind enough to bring 4 books that would be awarded to the people asking the best questions during this Q&A session.
Sure.
And we have some more questions. The next one is from Monica Teodorescu. She asks, what leadership style is the most typical in Google innovation culture?
Oh, sure. So Monica, thanks for the question there. I would say that the best leadership style at Google is really an authentic one that is based on the person's strengths. We really believe that leadership is something that can be taught, and so we have classes that bring out a person's leadership style. If there was one byline, I would say it would be no jerks and no assholes. This also goes back to the psychology research. There's a lovely book called The No Asshole Rule, which I encourage you to check out. And it really shows that no one wants to work with a jerk. People want to have this sense of humility at Google. That's what we hire for, and that's something we try to promote in our culture, where we respect the user, respect the opportunity, trust the users put in us, but most importantly, to respect each other.
Okay, I think you just blew up on social media in
Oh,
Romania,
yes.
so thank you.
Bob Sutton, yes, my professor.
Another question comes from Mircea Roman. He asks, what was your biggest failed project, and how did you overcome the loss?
Sure. So I would say, my biggest personal failure of a project was when we were working on the authors at Google team. I used to manage a speaking series for Google, and the biggest failure that I had there was really when I didn't trust my team, and I didn't develop the right projects. We were trying to find an automated way to make scheduling easier, and I was at the same time trusting people to lead these events, and they acted like jerks. It was kind of not a great idea. I think more broadly, if you look at one of our failed projects, our movement into the social space with Google+, how did we adapt to that? We tried an idea. The marketplace just didn't really respond, and then we wanted to take the successful learnings from that and make it a better project.
Okay, thank you. Mm-hmm. And one more question from Horatiu Sachelarie. How do you balance costs with investment in the team, incentives, motivators, etc.? And how far do you go and when do you put a limitation on it?
Yeah, I
Good
would
question.
say that we firmly believe that creativity is bred from constraint, and even if you go to the Bucharest Google office, which I got to do yesterday and see my friends out there, the desks are very close together. Teams are very leanly staffed. Everyone wants more resources and more headcount, even if you're like me working on the sales side of the house. And so we find that by staffing teams very leanly, it really encourages people to innovate, because if you can't do everything, it creates a sense of radical prioritization. So I did want to thank you for all your questions, and I'll also be around at the end and during the break if you want to search me out and ask me some things on LinkedIn. But it really all boils down to the sense of trust that we want to inspire in our organization. At Google, we really believe that people are fundamentally good, and we trust them with a lot of information and privileges. You think of the Google snacks, the Google Disneyland, for example. All of that is really an extension of these values of our mission. And I think that the principle is more broad as well. If you want to make work better, I encourage you to trust your employees, remove obstacles in front of them, give them the path they need to innovate, and as they come up with great ideas, reinforce that. All in all, remember the psychological safety. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Cliff, for all the insights. Very good presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.